a fashion, media, and communication with International Magic Precinct, Hyper Bodies, a summit on the
role of bodies in a more than human world.
I mean, maybe as a starting point, in terms of I guess like just in terms of AI, Elizaveta, I guess like first of all, just wondering if you could talk about what you have learned through working with the kind of AI systems and models. Like how has that changed what you think about these systems and sort of like what their even I guess like potential could be, especially coming from a sort of creative practice perspective? Like what are the things that you through working with it that you've kind of discovered and you've like altered or changed how you think about these very complex machine learning systems?
Yeah, I started off really feeling about it as an invader in a space of technology and innovation and the world structures and systems and like all the mathematical equations that run the data analytics and everything, and it felt all very like the binary and very specified, and so actually coming and having fun with it, and but also having a sort of conscious understanding of what I'm doing, it felt a bit like I was invading it because it was already it did belong to a certain group of scientists and professionals. So but as I mentioned in the break, I was yesterday on a really interesting roundtable where I was the only artist among maybe 20 PhD like scientists and professors, and again I felt a little bit like the odd one out. But what really interested me is that a lot of their research was based on actually trying to understand the complexity of what they started out. So trying to understand the sort of reverse engineer the deep learning systems, and like trying to sort of make them more linear and understandable and break it to the points and little bits so they can actually be absolutely sure why it gave this example or not. And I at first I thought I'm making like nice, or not, maybe not nice, but I was just like commenting, being like, oh, but like with my sort of more poetic point of view, maybe we should embrace the uncertainty, and sometimes it's actually good, and how can we like qualify all the pictures and words, it's like everybody wanted to do it and never succeeded, and they were absolutely shocked. One person literally stopped talking to me after I said I don't know, but I think the main outtake for me is that I think it's okay to have fun with it. I think it's we are all really conscious here. I think already if you started working with it seriously, you would have knowledge of all the bias and everything that it entails, this whole algorithmic world. But not to be sort of tempted or trying to really solve everything, even though maybe the program is created to solve problems. Maybe it's fun and cool to create a little bit more problems and then see how we can work it out. Something like that. It's still really poetic, but I'm not a scientist, so I don't know.
And I guess just off the back of that, how have you found, I guess like, I'm always very wary of using this term, but I guess like how have you found the reception of your work within, I guess, like the fashion industry or the kind of creative sector more broadly? Like, because obviously, like the work that you're producing does have a kind of critical relationship to these things, and you know, like a lot of the bags that you're producing, or the artifacts that you're producing, you know, aren't I don't think it's controversial to suggest that they're not conventionally beautiful or anything like that. So I guess.
Have you seen that comment? I received my first hate comment. I was so happy. It made my day. It was amazing. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they are not controversially beautiful, even though I love them with all my heart. Well, the thing is if you put something in a gallery setting, people think it's cool, and it works. And once those bags were in a gallery, people started like telling me, "Oh, can we have them for a shoot? No. Oh, blah blah blah." Fashion people who would, you know, like, I guess it works and they exist, but it's, I mean, fashion is a game of context and references, so it really doesn't, again, it really doesn't matter how they look. But yeah, my favorite hate comment was of a person who said, "I'm sorry, but the bags are really ugly." And
Amazing.
the best bit was that it was that picture of me as Robert Pattinson holding a bag, and the username of the person commenting was Syllab photocopy. So I was like, "Oh, that's perfect." So yeah,
amazing.
great story.
I mean, I guess because you mentioned the round table with the scientists and their kind of potential sort of unease with uncertainty, and I was just thinking that brings in, Chiara, the work that you, or the things that you were talking about. So I was kind of curious in terms of like how that, I guess, like just expanding on that kind of question of kind of uncertainty and how it plays out in these kind of different models of engaging with the future. I mean, I guess, like, do you see the in-out list as a way of sort of coming to terms with that uncertainty? Because I guess the in-out itself is it is also quite a binary kind of format, right? So I guess it's
yeah no, it's a very interesting question. I think well, first of all, I kind of wanted to say something about the bags. I really like how your work sort of reflects this biases and like this misunderstandings, like in the baguette, the Sandy baguette thing, and it was really brilliant how this like, rather than trying to, I don't know, again, like try and anticipate what works, kind of to show what doesn't work, and I think that's very poetic and it's very beautiful, so I wanted to say that. And then as it relates, how my thinking relates to uncertainty, I think you know, things like scenario planning are a discursive and predictive technique to make sense of the fact that that the future is sort of cannot be known. And so around the 1950s and 1960s, during the Cold War, and maybe because of the Cold War, there's been this shift from a singular future where things can be known and predicted and anticipated, and then this prediction either right or wrong, to a point where everything is the future is fundamentally unknowable. And so these predictions are just sort of like articulations of what might or might not be. And so there is this full embrace of uncertainty. Who was the Donald Rumsfeld that said the known unknown?
Unknown unknowns.
Yeah, and so doubt became like a really big feature of basically being able to sell whatever with little to no justifications. And as it relates to an analyst, I think I think in a way they're incredibly deterministic,
Mm.
saying, well, this is definitely in, this is definitely out.
Mm.
But of course, they're incredibly personal. So
Mm.
it's sort of like a parody of
Mm.
doubts. It's sort of like, of course, we don't know, but I know that carrot salad, it's out.
Yeah.
Or something. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
it definitely is out.
It's I'm over it because I had too much last year, so
Mm.
I don't know. But yeah, we were talking earlier also about Hayek, for example, and how he used this idea of the unknowability of things and uncertainty as an engine for something like the market. So you can never really truly know things through like a mechanism that is designed like the market, but you can only sort of trying to get close to signals. And yeah, it's always this tension, of course, between what you can know and what you cannot know. And it is very historically contingent. It does change a lot the last century. Again, we go from a moment where we certainly could know things to a moment where the doubt was everything, to a moment where we perhaps could know things, and now maybe we're in a moment where we individually know things, but we don't know collectively what this all means.
Yeah.
And maybe AI could be like a way to find this collective things together.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting how it goes from like a group approach and sort of like the even though created by specialists, this report was like a group approach to hence like more global scale, and then individualistic and therefore connected directly to desires and maybe market values. So then we sort of like lose this idea of maybe more like a engaging world building and like more global change, and it's very like direct personal views. But what I'm sorry, I'm like trying to connect things, but I remember that was important for me here to say to also from this round table. It was a really interesting thing that people were talking about the media and how different media channels are like more prominent and where they're less prominent. And it was one person who was calculating precisely the revenue of each media channel in Canada. And he built this whole like statistic that he then could bring to any sort of government structure to sort of bring the actual change. So this very precise analytic, with very data driven, was actually facilitating potential change, because everybody wanted to hear exact numbers. And then everybody at the round table was questioning, but why didn't this person calculate the metrics of attention span or the different normative qualities of the media? And because they were like unquantifiable and very personal driven, and they actually in the end didn't bring the results that everybody at this table was trying to achieve. So to like bring some sort of change to the market. And I'm not really making the point here now, but I think there is something like between this desire for like more like a humanitarian approach of like what's more interesting and versus like concrete market facts of revenues, and how those things are in different ways the AI facilitates, but also this report thingy kind of reflects on in a different way. Sorry, I like lost in sauce, but I think there is something about it. I need some,
No, you're saying something that's, I mean, if I understand correctly, there is this tension between, data-driven approach and evidence-based approach, and then things that are ineffable and they sort of don't make sense, they're a bit more poetic, and they show where the problems are more than the solutions. And
those people were still trying to calculate them though, sorry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And the opening paragraphs of this, the use of knowledge in society, this paper from Hayek that I was showing earlier, it says that a fallacy of thinking about information and knowledge in general is that if only we would know what everyone is thinking and desiring and wanting, or if only we would know, then we would be able to plug it into some kind of machine, and then we would know everything. And this is a logical fallacy, because we don't have such machine. And then many people have been thinking that maybe through artificial intelligence or big data, we would be able to somehow synthesize everything and have this perfect machine where we know everything, but still there is always something that's unknowable.
Yeah. And we cannot collect all the data about what we want and desire as well.
Yeah, and even then there is no such like perfect model. So yeah.
Yeah, embrace the unknown.
I mean, I don't. You can say it, and I can repeat it.
I have 3 questions.
Okay. Maybe you should come to the front then. Yeah, come.
Sorry,
It's just
can't hear.
I'm just hover by you.
Dude.
No one else is going to ask a question.
Yeah,
now
no,
because
then
you.
you're starting.
Later.
Yeah.
Okay, I have 3
Wow.
questions. So
Maybe this.
just stand next to me. I mean, thanks.
Yes.
This is a lot of pressure on my question.
Yeah.
So I guess
good.
my question.
No pressure. All cool.
My question for you, Elizaveta, is whether any of the brands have attempted to have their IP removed from the data sets, the training that the AI models have been trained on, because you have like Getty images, saying all of our library needs to be removed and so on. So that's my question for you. But
I don't know.
Oh, okay, that was easy. Okay, but that's one thing to consider. The question that I want to put to both of you is that we might not be able to know the future, but I think I think 2 days ago Microsoft unveiled its search engine adaptation, where they're kind of loading GPT-3 or a similar model into Bing that is searching the internet, not just searching like a kind of an artifact, like a kind of dead model. So if you consider that in a visual landscape, you kind of start getting into a world where you really are kind of able to get information from the AI that is sort of pretty real time, like pretty close to the present. And like I couldn't help but see an overlap between the in and out models and the world that you're inhabiting when it comes to like trends, because how do we even know when a trend exists historically? Like sometimes we notice it as an individual, but other times it's usually some kind of like cultural arbiter who's telling us like this is a thing, and then you like start seeing it or whatever, whereas actually that could be like the idea of the diffuse in and out list. When a machine sees that, what we kind of praise them for is their ability to find patterns, right? Like pattern recognition that we as individuals are just not capable of doing. So I'm kind of like just coming towards a question here about how we might start using these things, not to these non-human agents to not to give us something that we're already looking for, but rather to have a predictive function themselves. So yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting question that I'd like to put to you. Like, yeah, like how do you kind of find the alien, or the how do you use the system as a mirror in a way that is not going to give you something you're already looking for? And just very quickly, my other question to Chiara was the butterboard, is it in or out?
The butterboard.
Yeah.
I think it's out.
It's out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's out. Don't do that.
So you're pro butterboard?
I love the butterboard.
You do?
Yeah.
I never had one. We should actually.
I just love butter.
Thank you for such an interesting question. Truly, no, I'm serious. But what it made me think directly about is that the prediction is only true when we can like see if it's happened. So in a sense, regardless of whether, how and for what reason we are trying to predict something, there is always like a window for a mistake. And especially if we're talking fashion trends, which is absolutely like not even man-made thing, but like industry-made thing, and maybe even more specifically trend forecaster industry-made thing. So to like make it happen and sell it again. So in that regard, I think if you have the balls to say that you are a trend forecaster, it doesn't really matter if you will be using AI or not, but if you say that you're using AI, let's say, and then you're saying, I have the most amazing algorithm and it's like absolutely true and it sees it every like 100 years ahead, then it's the question of whether people will believe you or not. And also, you can fabricate, I guess, a lot of evidence that it's been true, because fashion is so, you know, multifaceted and can be seen from so many different angles. People in 2000s thought like, I don't know, Uggs were not really that fashionable. They were just comfortable. Now it's a trend. Was it a trend back then? I mean, it was like on the market, but now it's like a cool thing to wear. So you can fake it until you make it. I guess that's how I feel.
That's a very useful, interesting term, considering that you made your,
Oh yeah.
like you faked it and then you made it, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, I live by it.
Yeah, just to quickly reply about the kind of the things that we produce, but we cannot see unless we zoom out. Yeah, for sure. And I think there are a lot of technologies that can help with that. But there is still a conceptual problem of how do you aggregate this data, which I think is also what Elizaveta was trying to get, was, you know, getting towards. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, you could model in so many different ways to make any sort of argument. So, but yeah, I really like this idea of the emergent properties of having a lot of different data and see what comes out of it in a way that this data wouldn't make sense on its own. So it wouldn't make sense personally, although it does make a lot of sense personally when you write it, but then when it comes together, it would produce something new. And that would be an interesting experiment. I am in this 500 people group chat on WhatsApp randomly, which is the maximum for group chat
really?
on WhatsApp. Yeah. And
I don't have so many friends, so it's like, I mean, that's like a... Well.
They're not my friends. Some of them are, but I have 3 friends. No, but no, in this, actually, I wanted to ask them to send their own in and out list and like see what comes out, or like try and aggregate things. Like then it would be very difficult, but because you have to find the unit. Like, what is the unit? I mean, if mental health is out and then carrots are in, you know, it's very difficult to standardize and see, like, okay, how do you measure and how do you even, when you can make it, you can make it random, yeah.
But then also there are all the, I don't know if I cannot hear if somebody's talking in the audience, so I'm sorry if I'm interrupting.
No, it's fine.
Okay, but with the in and out list, more specifically, I think it can also, you know, sort of systematize, okay, in outs, we must have a vegetable, a sport, a person, a to-do thing, a sort of mental health disease, and the name of a relative. And then it will just keep on creating them. But then you just need to like systematize what sort of
categories.
Objective, categories. And but then again, I think it's possible to fake it as well, easily.
I was thinking, I think I mentioned it in my like whatever introduction, the sociologist Eleanor Esposito, and I mean she writes a lot about time and our kind of relationship to time, especially the future. And she's written about fashion, the kind of invention of fashion, and how actually from her perspective or from her kind of reading, like fashion can be read as this way of kind of creating a kind of collective consensus about the future at the point when God died. So at a point when kind of society didn't have this kind of overriding kind of guide or kind of fashion became a means by which you could sort of collectively have a shared understanding about what the present and future would be. So a kind of trend would be some way of kind of collectively going, okay, like to a large, whatever, on a sociological kind of level, we can agree that these things are in, these things are out. But what was interesting for Expositor about this was that it was, whilst we developed this understanding of a kind of trend and can collectively agreed to it as some kind of social bond or whatever, we also, at the same time that we did that, we also recognize that in 6 months' time that will be replaced with something else. So there was also this kind of arbitrary nature to it that was like baked in at the beginning of the kind of conceptual understanding of it. So she was saying this is a really kind of a really significant kind of conceptual development in terms of how we relate to time. But I was saying this, so I think it's kind of interesting in terms of like trends being this thing. But then more recently, she's talked about this condition, this post-contemporary condition, where she argues that in post-contemporaneity, it's kind of tricky, the future becomes more unknowable the more we try to anticipate it. So because we develop these models in which we try to predict the future, the more we use these models to predict them, to predict the future, these models themselves feed back and therefore alter the future in which we're predicting. So it becomes this kind of really very complex but interesting thing where actually, you know, under this condition of post-contemporaneity, the future becomes increasingly unknowable as we use these technologies, etc., to try and sort of predict them. So I was just kind of like curious in terms of like what we, I guess, like collectively think about, yeah, I guess like the kind of the use of these technologies in these in relation to understanding the future. Yeah.
This made me think of the idea of performativity in markets. That was, I think, Donald McKenzie, the historian, brought about it, and basically it states that because financial markets operate on such short and immediate timelines, then essentially the models and the predictions that the markets make have this self-fulfilling prophecy character. And so it's also like another way to kind of conjure into reality a certain outcome just by modeling it in a certain way, or inputting certain signals or using a specific technology. And so, yeah, I mean, the notion of performativity is also, it's borrowed from, I think, gender studies or like other fields, but then applied to the financial markets as it does, it just kind of gives this ontological quality to making the future and kind of willing into existence things that that one wants or accidentally does will into existence just by talking about them or modeling them. And with numbers in the financial markets, it's very explicit. It's a very explicit relationship, and we know it's true. We know that there are markets about expectations of what's going to happen, and in other aspects of society, like perhaps fashion, that's a bit more subtle or nuanced. But I really like what you said about this sort of social contract that we all have, that we're saying, okay, this is gonna work for some time, but it's not. And it's a very I don't know, soft power way to keep, I don't know, civilization.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was wondering like what the the equivalent of that could be. I mean, like, would it be a trend, or would it be a kind of collective like in-out list, or like what or how would a trend sort of change through the integration of AI systems, understanding that it's part of this kind of thing that like AI systems not being a thing that accurately, like categorically predicts the future, but is used as a mechanism in this much more fluid way, a much more contingent way, I guess.
I have two thoughts. First is in regards to that idea of that this post-God dead world where we all have these trends. It made me think of the idea that, like, in a sense, the fashion trend is the communal a sort of pact to agree on a certain version of the apocalypse, because then we're all gonna die, and that's how we will dress in the world, because something will happen. Well, so you're just preparing every season, and then the seasons change, the version of the future changes, and then you have to change the sort of dress up for this apocalypse. And as for the AI prediction machine, I think it's because it's I personally find it super interesting that we of course can use it as a like build a better future forecasting machine, but we can also approach it as a bank of knowledge, and it only has the knowledge we've already created or we've already experienced. And therefore I personally think that no matter what it will create, it will be sort of already a new iteration of an existing trend. So, and new emergences, they are harder actually to identify within what it creates, but also produce. Because only if we believe that every future is sort of an instance of what's already happened, then of course, yes. But if we believe in some sort of surprise and magic, then I think we need to figure out another way of data collecting for these machines to actually predict things, or like input their analysis in some sort of way that will be seen as a hardcore data. In fact, they can base their future predictions upon. Because for now, I don't know. I'm not sure they do that in like a long-term perspective.
No, I mean, I think it's also, well, probably would have to understand what machine learning is in different contexts, because yeah, I remember this meme that really stayed with me of like a bell curve, and there were two different yeah, like big nets, and one was one said statistics and one said machine learning. And you know, essentially a lot of these models are trained on past data, and they're modeled in a way that is quite traditionally how you would do predictions 50 years ago, but then it's sort of accelerated. And I'm not like on top of things in terms of where machine learning is, but then who he is, because things are changing every day. Which is exciting, but it's very hard to kind of speculate on, I think. What do you think then?
I mean, I think the premise of sort of using any system or any technology to predict the future, I mean, I think it's like flawed from the beginning. Again, as we were talking earlier about, you know, this condition of possibilities of the future being sort of, I guess, like contingency. And, you know, and again, you can look at things like the financial markets as collectively recognizing that as their condition of possibilities. So, you know, the whole financial markets and sort of derivatives are based on this collective assumption or agreement that the future is categorically unknowable in the present. So because of that, then it allows you to trade. And, you know, just interestingly, like a derivative, the price of a derivative or the value among traders of a derivative is its highest value is at the point when its ultimate price is unknowable. So the point that a derivative price becomes kind of knowable, then it reduces in value and it becomes less possible to trade it. So, you know, I think in terms of like, say, like the financial markets, they have kind of agreed that the future is uncertain or contingent, and they build around that. They make that kind of thing. So I think in a way, for me, that's a much more actually much more imaginative conceptually and kind of creatively, much more imaginative kind of relationship to the future. And I think, like, ideally I would like to develop or help whatever be part of something whereby like AI systems are used in that way, as opposed to trying to as accurately as possible predict the future, whether that would be next week or tomorrow or 10 years or etc. So I don't know, I think and I think there are possibilities for that, you know, like the notion later tomorrow we'll be hearing from Matt Dryhurst, and he's developed this notion of like spawning. So this idea of using AI systems to kind of generate possibilities which then can be kind of used and explored further. So that may be one way of creating a kind of alternative way of using AIs, thinking of them as like spawning these possibilities which could then be explored further, rather than trying to narrow it down to a single accurate kind of prediction. That would be my preference, I guess. Yeah, but I guess, like, does anyone have any questions or follow-ups from that? I mean, I guess, like, oh, yeah.
I just actually you use that word contingent a few times. I think it's a lovely word. I just like you to talk about how imagine what that would mean.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think so. Charlie asked the question of like contingent or contingency as a term, and what does it kind of mean? I mean, I think, like, for me, like, contingency is, I mean, I think like the standard definition would be something that could have been or could be otherwise. So I think that's, you know, like the standard definition of it. But I think also we can expand on that and think of, I mean, the other aspect of contingency is this a coming together or kind of point when there's a touching of something. So for me, and my understanding of contingency is this kind of unknowability, when the unknowability of the future comes into contact with us. So we have a kind of material contact with it in some form. And I would make a distinction between contingency and uncertainty. So I think like uncertainty is something that is experienced by an individual or a collection of individuals or collective, but it is something that we experience or feel, where and this would be philosophically, contingency is something outside of an individual as such. It is something that we come into contact with, and is typically connected with an event. So, for instance, the philosopher Alain Badiou talks about the event in relation to contingency as this kind of contact with this kind of unknowability of the future, where uncertainty would be how we experience that contact with the unknowability of the future. And then, you know, and then the other term as part of this would be risk. And like, risk is the point when that uncertainty can be measured and kind of predicted and kind of, I guess, selected to some degree. So like, risk is a very kind of financially determined term, where and that can be measured in principle, where uncertainty is this kind of like contact with contingency, with the future. So that would be my whatever, like, reading of it.
Well, I have a question. Doesn't that then sort of reverse the whole point of being unpredictable and embracing the uncertainty, if we're so keen on the contingency with its measurement, with the risk which can be measured?
I mean, I guess you would say like contingency can't be, I mean, in principle, it can't be, well, I mean, you could try and measure it if you wanted to, but it's not something that can be measured. Where risk would be, like, or risk is the kind of point of kind of measurement, right?
But isn't 50-50 ultimate measurement of contingency?
But 50-50 would be like, you have option A or option B.
Or like, if it happens or not happens.
Yeah, but
You see what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that that would be a kind of, I mean, would that would become a kind of thing where the use of that would be incredibly limited, right?
But exactly. So I think this whole maybe this idea of contingency is good for finance or good for gambling or something like that. But in future predictions, it goes into this idea of will it happen or not happen, but also because I guess a future will be created out of a myriad of things that will happen or not happen. It will be hard to find all those points of contingency.
Yeah, but I think contingency would be that there wouldn't be a way, even in principle, of like identifying all possible outcomes.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's beyond that ability to say, you know, even if you had the highest number possible in the world, whatever, like that outlined all, it is kind of beyond that as such. That would be the philosophical position, right?
It's also used in history a lot, the word contingency, and to describe like certain points in history where something shifted and there were some contingency, some things that were external factors that made it that produced the things that we have, but we could have easily produced other things, right? So like, I don't know, because the US founded and hired Herman Kahn rather than someone else, then we have the kind of ways that we think about the future that we have. But if they hired someone from Argentina, then we would have something different. And so it's also there is this idea of virtual history, so trying to understand what could have been. And I think that the relationship with the future is clear, because when you see what you have now and you ask where it comes from, that it shows that it could easily be otherwise, then you also understand that what we have is not what we need to be to necessarily have. And so you can kind of be more bold and try and change things in a different way. So I guess that would be like the way that contingencies are used in history or in writing history or talking about the past, which I also find interesting.
Any other questions? I mean, if we don't have any more questions, we'll, I guess we'll kind of wrap up for the day. So just like to thank Elizaveta and Chiara, and thanks everyone for attending.